Military families have incredible stories of perseverance while navigating frequent moves, deployments, food insecurity, transitioning out of the military, and more. This is the place for them to share those stories, highlighting unique experiences of military families. Welcome to the Professional Dependent Podcast.
You're
Uh-oh.
you're way more of a stud than I am, taking 5 shots of espresso.
Yeah.
I I already had my monster for the day, or for my morning monster earlier on my first interview, so
Oh, there you
I'm down to water today.
go.
Oh, all right. Well, since we're sitting here chatting, Barry, you and I have known each other since I figured it out the other day. We met in 2011, or was it 2012?
Somewhere around there.
It was.
Once you go back 3 years, man, my memory starts.
Dawn.
Yeah, it's been a decade and a half or something like that.
Yeah, so we worked together. We were both cops with the Air Force. We were both civilian cops, but you were prior service. And so why don't you introduce yourself for the people that besides me that don't know who you are?
Yeah, so my name's Barry Morgan. I am an Air Force veteran, current Air Force spouse. I did 11 and a half years in the military. And now, throughout multiple periods of work, now I've ended up as working for the University of Washington in their emergency management division as a plans, training, and exercise manager for the UW enterprise. So that's kind of what I do now, and I remote work doing that position, and I have my wife is still finishing up her military career, and I got 4 kids and 2 dogs. So I'm very much busy, and that's where you caught the beginning of the 5-shot Americano.
Four kids, two dogs, a partridge in a pear tree, and all that
Yeah,
fun stuff.
we're getting there. We're getting there.
All right, so in the few things we want to talk about that I kind of emailed you about, one of which being this is Emergency Preparedness Month. And as an emergency manager, emergency preparedness, like one of the things because one of the things that we learned, or that I know you learned it because I went to the same school you did, is emergency preparedness is everybody's responsibility, because you can't wait for help to get there, because it's going to take a while for help to get there. And so you have to be responsible for yourself.
Yeah.
So in appreciation of Emergency Preparedness Month, what do you see as like basic ideas and things that, we'll just say military families, because that's the majority of my audience,
Yeah.
need to be aware of in terms of being prepared for different types of emergencies?
Yeah, I think I take a little bit different approach. I've always get asked this question from people uh, that make a lot more money than me, or work in different offices and work different schedules and stuff like that. Like, what do I need to survive? Tell me what I need. Give me the shopping list, and I'll go and get it, and
Hmm.
I'll be prepared. And it's really not like that. I think you kind of break it up to a bunch of different things. Number one, if you're talking about military families, we move a lot.
Yep.
We're on our 13th move right now. We move kind of all over the United States, and when you move to an area, just know your hazards.
Mhm.
What am I at risk for? And how you get that is go to your local emergency management website for your county, and they usually have some hazards that are kind of reoccurring out there. And once you know your hazards, start creating a plan. That's how we begin that chapter of resiliency, to make you more resilient with you as a community. So emergency management and first responders don't have to prioritize you,
Mhm.
so you're a little bit more resilient. So make your plan, and that includes your communications plan. How are you going to communicate, right? Is it with your kids, your spouses, your people back home? There's all kinds of ways to do that. It is you can do it via mass text. You can SMS versus the air style text that you send out. Like, there's different methods there. How are you going to communicate with them? Leave a voicemail, right? So just change your voicemail and your recording. Hey, everyone, I'm fine. I'm going to be located at this school. You can
Mhm.
find me here. So that way, when people call your phone, they get your voicemail, they get the message that you're going to be at. All kinds of different things. What about your kids? You're going to be at work, something hits, one of those black swan events, like,
Mhm.
you know, severe storm, knocked out power, something like that. Where are my kids going to be taken to? Just knowing what's going to be there. So making a plan, and then also make a plan for your home too. We were talking about knowing your neighbors.
Right.
Talk about first responders, are like, oh, military, military and law enforcement, fire. A lot of times in a large disaster, your neighbors are your first responders.
Yep.
So know who they are and be familiar with them. don't make it awkward. I'm like, hey, everyone, welcome to Thanksgiving. Let's talk about emergency preparedness and where my kids are going to be. Like, but I think it's honest to talk to your kids about it, and then get to know your neighbors and kind of talk to each other, because they're going to be the ones that understand your family. So when they come and check on you, they know you have little kids, or you have a dog that doesn't get agree with people or something like
Right.
that. So know your neighbors. And then, once you make that plan, once you know your neighbors, you got to get your communication plan, all your hazards that are out there, then, understand your risk. You're from Louisiana. I'm from deep South Mississippi. In our early 20s, it was okay to hang out at home during a Category 3 hurricane.
Yeah.
Now that we have kids and dogs, we're like, hey, Category 2, we're going to leave. And that's how we're going to do that. And your financial situation is all going to drive what you do. Your level of risk you're willing to accept. I got 4 kids. I got 2 twin daughters that are 3, 11 and 7-year-old. We had a wildfire happen back in Washington State when my daughters were I don't know, 6 months old. And we knew that fire, public utilities were going to shut down the electrical
Right.
for that fire. So we left because our breast milk was going to go bad for our kids, and it just made it like, we're just going to go and get out of here. Like, it just made more sense. So knowing your risk, knowing your financial situation, because everyone's different. You go to a base, or you move somewhere, and you live next to someone. It's like, oh, it's just a Category 3, nothing to worry about. And that social amplifier is talking in your ear, and you're like, yeah, it's nothing to worry about. But they don't understand your financial situation. They don't understand your predicament. They don't understand your work. They don't understand your kids. So your family best. You know where your risk threshold is best to make that decision. I see a lot of military family members. Let's look at Florida. They're like, we're going to wait till the last second to fly out. Like, do you know how much plane tickets go up? Like, the closer you get to the day, you're more okay just driving out and taking your kids on a vacation. But if you're in an area that has a risk of power outages when it comes to storms, you may want to invest in maybe some solar flashlights now, and not carrying around tons of double D batteries or whatever it is.
Right.
For your kids, emergency preparedness, what keeps them happy? Is it a pack of Pokemon cards in there? Is it, where is it? And then where are you going to keep that emergency preparedness kit that you do buy? Most of us, when we commute, we spend most of our time at work and in our car. So, if you get stuck in a car, do you have snacks? And I'm of the mindset, if you tell me to prepare my kids for 2 weeks, my family for, 2 weeks of emergency, that's a whole room in my house that I'm stacking bottles of water and stuff like that. So your hazards and the utility implications of those hazards are going to affect how you prepare. So if you get power outages, great. Buy some flashlights that are maybe solar powered. You don't need a bunch of double Ds you have to keep buying every few years.
Right.
But if your water's going to be on, it's fine. You don't need to go buy 1,000 gallons of water. But there's different things out there now, like water purifier sticks that do stuff. But I will say, you go to the grocery store these days and you buy a Monster Energy drink and a Snickers bar, and it's like $50 when you come out. Don't go to the store and go, I need all this stuff for emergency preparedness because here's the checklist that I got from Home Depot or FEMA or county. Pick out what fits you the best, what works best for your family. Do you need baby food, wipes, what gets you by, medicine? And then just buy one thing as you go to the grocery store. Hey, I'll pick up an extra pack of batteries. I'll pick up an extra X, Y, and Z, whatever else you need when you're at Home Depot to help your house. So it doesn't need to be done like swipe your credit card for $2,500 because the emergency preparedness director said so. Slow build up to resiliency. It's not an instantaneous kind of thing. So,
and don't go out and buy all the milk and bread like the day before the storm.
Yeah, hits. And that's a real thing. Is people wait till the last second for Home Depot, and this is another thing for your military people is a lot of us live on base. We're not carrying around all the stuff we had on our last base. We may have got rid of a lot of things. And if you own a home, like Bill, who's lived in the neighborhood for 30 years off base, he has a shed. He's ready. He always has a stockpile, and he has tie downs for his boat, his bass boat, and stuff like that are out there. But you don't have that kind of stuff. So what you do is you rush to Home Depot to go get that kind of stuff. And when you have a large hurricane, geographical, regional implications, then supply chains take a hit and you may not be able to access that stuff. So, don't go rush to the store at the last second. Just like don't go rush the store like, hey, they said evacuate. Now I'm going to buy my wife, my kids a plane ticket, out of here. Just, look at the hurricane. Yeah, it may hit. Go take a vacation, family. It's a lot of your military people, you know, if the active duty member may have to stay behind to support the mission.
Right.
And you may have to take that risk. You can stay in a dorm. You can stay in a tent. You can, use baby wipes and those kind of things, but you don't want your family going through that. So oftentimes, if you look at the cost, it's a lot cheaper to send them on a road trip to, on a little vacation and do stuff like that. But you can go outside and look, my area gets a lot of wet snow, and you have a whole lot of above ground power lines. Well, guess what happens with wet snow and trees and builds up, you're at high risk for power outages.
Power lines tend to snap.
And they may and you may have that squirrel who gets kind of crazy and just knocks out your power for some reason. But there's a lot of different things. So knowing your hazards, we had an earthquake here in Los Angeles. I'm in Los Angeles. I was going to the Saints game because they were playing the Chargers, but my wife was home with my two little girl twins, and earthquake hit, and she felt it. And yeah, we have a 75-inch TV on the wall, and we have earthquake straps. I learned that like right after getting here. We have a minor earthquake. I'm like, well, this looks like a thing. So I had to order them. And I told you, I think at Beale, like we have a trailer, like a 10-foot tow behind trailer for my ATV, but we turned that into like a little evacuation thing for wildfires. We hung up emergency preparedness kits for our kids inside the trailer and put some water in there and just some stuff. And that way the dog kennels were in there. So if we had to evacuate, I just back my truck up. And we did have to do that twice to wildfires that were imminent to the base. So just know your hazards. Like if you don't know what's going to affect you and how it's going to affect you and your family situation, you really can't make yourself more resilient. But I will say, if you own a home, there's a high chance you have a wrench that's a non-sparking and you know how to shut off your utilities.
Right.
If you live on base and something's coming or an earthquake happens or a hurricane or something like that, chances are you don't know where the water shutoff is, or you don't own that non-sparking wrench to go shut off your gas or anything like that. So, that's some of the advantages, but also understand your own risk. Don't listen to everyone else. What you and I think about hurricanes, my mother living in Poplarville, Mississippi, always said, nothing can be worse than Hurricane Camille. And I listened to that. And then as Katrina was hitting, she called me and said, this is worse than Camille. Yeah. And I was like, Mom, but that's what I grew up understanding. Like, that's a hurricane. It can't be worse than Camille. Nothing's worse than Camille. So we just hang out. Category 3, we're outside playing in the ditches where the water's so full and being dumb. I got 4 kids now, and like, no, Category 2, high cat 2. We are leaving town. Wildfire anywhere around me, you're leaving town because I know that critical infrastructure is going to get shut off.
Well, and so much of that comes back to you have to take a little personal responsibility.
Yeah,
like you can't just sit around and wait on somebody to come bail you out. Because if you do, you're already going to be behind the curve, and you're putting yourself and your family at a greater risk than if you would have taken a little onus, done 30 seconds worth of Googling to figure out what is my area at risk for.
Yeah.
And taking personal stock of, what do you know about your family and your situation to protect yourself when something happens, because it's never if, it's always when.
Yeah, we're always one day closer.
Yep.
Always one day closer to something else happening. And when you look at a hurricane, nothing could be like Katrina. Hurricanes all have different behaviors. We look at Harvey. Harvey was the slowest moving hurricane. I think it was a high Cat 3 when it hit Houston, but it carried an enormous amount of rain, and it was so slow moving, and it hit an urban area where everything's paved, it couldn't drain. So urban flooding was a real deal. And I still to this day don't know why people drive through standing water on roadways I still don't understand that. But knowing not to do that, knowing here's your hazard, knowing that, hey, this storm's moving smooth. We live in a city, it's going to flood, or I live in a flood zone. I can't tell you how many people bought houses and they go, well, I didn't realize that next to this river, I'm going to have to pay $1,000 a month in flood insurance. And it's not just that. We're now living in a time to where you see storms hitting like Harvey, and you're not next to any water. You just receive flooding. And, you follow NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program. Almost half those filings are in areas that are in low to mid-level flood risk.
Yeah.
So it's a widespread issue when it comes to storms. So every storm is different. Every winter storm is going to be different
Mhm.
makeup and behavioral patterns, and they're all going to carry different things. But just understanding your risk. And I said earlier, maybe listen to your neighbors because they're going to be like, oh, it's not going to be that bad. I lived in
Right.
Ohio. I lived in here. I lived in Alaska.
Mhm.
You know, I know what snow looks like. Well, you know, we're a little bit different over here. So if they're staying, great. But also
Yeah.
look around your neighbors too. If they're all evacuating, take a clue. Like,
Maybe it's time to go.
yeah, you may be the problem there, but uh, we unfortunately will live in a time of um, fake news, right?
Yeah.
And they're telling me to evacuate. I don't need to evacuate. A lot of evacuation areas and hurricanes, like they have evacuation zones that tier
Right.
you out, right? Um, just look at the storm's makeup.
Mhm.
Don't listen to I'm listening to CNN or Fox or ABC or news. Here's what Noah's saying. The wind's blowing
Right.
this. I live in an area that does this. I live next to here. I have 4 kids, 2 kids, no kids. You know, I have a disabled mom. I'm disabled.
Mhm.
Um, here are my risk. And my once my checkbox goes and I understand like, this is the level I'm willing to push it to, and
Right.
here's the reason I'm not willing to push it to. So just understanding that and knowing it and being able to adapt to that risk, and that's going to be critical. Um, and you know, military, there's a lot of if you're financially impacted, like I said, you go buy a Monster and a Snickers, it's $50.
Mhm.
If your pay grade ends with an N or with an E, starts with an E,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not good, right? Like there's a lot of E's families that are struggling out there,
Yeah.
especially with inflation. There are areas to help. There are your bank. USAA is a bank that I've
Mhm.
gone through that's always willing to say, hey, we'll help you out. Like, right. So when I went to Hurricane Katrina, I went there. I took leave to go help my parents out.
Mhm.
I called USA. I was like, I need $3,000. I'm gonna go buy
Yeah.
emergency supplies and go to Katrina. They're like, done.
Yep.
But you have Air Force aid. There's other
Mhm.
sites through the Air Force, but just don't wait till the last second when you're an hour out from the storm hitting. I need a
Right.
plane ticket for my wife and my kids. That's got to be an early decision, and you got to be okay with your decision. Look,
Mhm.
you know, talk to your spouse. I'm sorry we had to evacuate the kids, but it just seemed like the right thing to do at the time.
Yeah, because I guarantee they'd rather be wrong and alive than be, than wrong and never and had not left, and now you're in a big freaking cluster. You
Yeah,
know?
and then also look where you're at. You're in Ohio. Um, thankfully I don't have snow in beautiful Los Angeles. I'm looking at the cruise ships right now, but you got snow. There's a lot of families out there that've never owned a generator. And they say
Right.
own a generator, and you have the hazards of cranking a generator where there's no exhaust or
Mhm.
and you have unfortunate events that occur from that. So there's just new hazards, new things to learn everywhere you go. And unfortunately, if you don't have a house that's built and you've lived there for a long time, chances are you don't have the whole generator and you're not really ingrained and understand the hazards. And that's like when we do natural hazard mitigation planning. I
Right.
don't talk to the military guy who's been here for 2 days. I talked to Jim down the road who's lived here for 50 years,
Right.
and he's seen undocumented flooding incidents or could tell me about Hurricane Bob that came through and what happened there. So I truly understand the community impact. Uh, just understand that.
Mhm.
Talk to your community. Your community goes through a lot of things. You have your base emergency management that can talk a lot to your workspace, but your community has been doing this for years. They have hazard mitigation plans. They outline the hazards that affect your area. They have mapping that's out there that
Mhm.
shows flood zones, and uh, that's another thing too. Don't ever listen when it says this is a 1,000-year flood. Like that is not a truthful thing. It
Half the
doesn't.
people don't even understand what that actually even means.
Yeah. So that's the chance of occurrence, but
Yeah.
it's not something that happens every 1,000 years. Like
Right.
there are areas in Mississippi and Louisiana that have seen 1,000-year floods 3 of the last 5 years.
Right.
So Um, don't ever take those numbers into account. That's one of those bad things. That and the Waffle House index. You know, like if your Waffle House is closed or open, your community's on the rebound. That's not true. Uh, so
I mean, there's a little truth to it because it's
I mean,
Waffle House.
yeah, I mean there is, but yeah, there is some truth to it too. But I will say too, if there are a lot of opportunities out there to help your family. I'm not sure if it's a CDC thing, but sending your littles with emergency kits to school and hanging up on the wall. Like I said, I put like my oldest is, he'll be 12. If I put like a lacrosse ball and a pack
Mhm.
of baseball cards in his bag, like that's a big pick me up for him in the case of
Right.
disaster. For my 3-year-olds, it's pictures of the family
Mhm.
or, a favorite toy or something like that. Buy a second toy, right?
Right.
I have twins, so I got to buy all kinds of stuff. But
Doubles
put
of
that in their
everything.
bags. Like
Yeah.
it's a comforting thing for them. Like,
Mhm.
so you don't have to send them with like, oh, here's your 10 cases of water and double D
3
batteries and
MREs.
yeah, there technologies out there. We have solar flashlights that are like I don't know, like this big,
Mhm.
and they are, I mean, they are bright. And then we have our more permanent, like super bright flashlight. But you know, you've been in hurricanes before in the South. Like power goes out, it's humid outside. Here come the mosquitoes.
Oh, yeah.
You know, bug spray,
Mhm.
medicine, those kind of things. Your first aid kit. We talked about your neighbors are going to be your first responder.
Mhm.
Having a first aid kit in your house, that way, if your neighbors come to see you, there's something that can help you.
Right.
That they can to help bandage you. So yeah, know your neighbors, but don't make it that awkward Thanksgiving conversation.
Well, and that goes to a lot of other things too, because I know, like for us, for me personally, like part of our emergency plan, any place we've lived, is because we always live off base. It's just something we prefer to do. Um, is we do get to know our neighbors, and then once we kind of know them well enough, like we start telling the kids, okay, if the like once we move into a house, like okay, if the fire is here, which way are you going? If
Yeah,
this happens, which way are you going? Whose house are you going to? But then on the other side of that is we tell those people, hey, if something happens to us, our kids are coming to your house. Like we clear it first. We're not like, hey, our kids are coming to your house and there's nothing you
yeah,
can do about it. But you kind of build that community plan because if something happens to me, I'm not exactly a little dude. My 11-year-old isn't going to drag me down the stairs.
yeah,
She can go get my next door neighbor, and they can either get me help or they can call whatever. Because if Kelly's deployed,
yeah,
I got two small kids. What are they going to do? Give me CPR?
yeah. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
I had the most recent retired security forces chief that lives across the street from me, and I
Mhm.
I told my boys, I'm like, if anything ever happens to me, if I ever trip and fall down the stairs,
Right.
go to his house and tell him. So they know that, and I told him that as well. But yeah, knowing your neighbors, a lot of them come from different backgrounds, and they have different skills that they can provide and help you out. But identifying those neighbors and where to go, evacuations, like
Mhm.
common points. You get there with your girls, and you're in an area they probably know, like, hey, I know that store, it's close to the
Yep.
house, or I know this, and I can't tell you. I did an evacuation plan for a building, a business, and I was like, "Where do you guys evacuate to?" Like, "Oh, to the parking lot." Okay, well, you pull up the piping, and it's right on top of a gas main. Like, well, you're not going to evacuate there. You need to go somewhere else. But
Right.
identifying the common place to where if something happens, there is a physical identifier that they can go.
Yep.
Even if the landscape changes, like a hurricane or
Mhm.
that's a big one. I'm going hurricane here because that's the big boy, especially with earthquakes. But if the landscape changes,
Right.
what is going to remain to where your kids can go to,
Mhm.
and you kind of communicate that. Like, I know my kids are going to be there because chances are you're going to be at work,
Right.
or your spouse is going to be at work, or your spouse is going to be at home, your kid's going to be at work, that you're going to be separated when something big happens. Um, and it doesn't even have to be big. It could be one of these black swan events, like,
Mhm.
you know, water mains breaking, or, I have seen cars hit light poles and knock out power for a substantial amount of time. And,
Mhm.
just different things that you need to kind of get by. And we look at how many times where Shreveport, Louisiana, or people in the South are under boil hazard.
Oh yeah.
Had to boil water, and they're out there buying up all the water in the grocery store, and that's an emergency. Like, especially if you have young kids. Jackson, Mississippi's going through that, for several years now, where you have to get fresh water. How am I going to get fresh water?
Mhm.
And that's very important. So yeah, but also yeah, have them know where to go.
Yep.
Go to this house. Trust that person. Understand you're qualified. Does that person have my phone number?
Right.
Right. My kids aren't going to carry around, like, look at the fridge, and they're not that responsible. They're 11 and 7, and the other ones are 3
No,
years old. So
nobody's closer to that responsible.
I give those people my phone number, that they would know how to reach me as well. So, and again, little key things, like if you get your phone and you know that, hey, reception is going to be an issue,
Mhm.
and my out of state contact is trying to get a hold of me, they want to know if we're safe. I can just change the voice recording of my phone, my
Right.
voicemail message, and allow everyone to understand where I'm at, or just send a text out to every one of all my key
Right.
contacts, and that text is going to keep trying to get out. It's not looking for a
Mhm.
phone. So different kind of communications there that goes into that family plan of where you're going to be at, where you're going to go, who to call, and do it over Thanksgiving, do it over Christmas. Hey kids, I know you just opened up your presents, but
But here we
let's
go.
talk about disasters real quick.
Well, and not even just disasters. This is the first year that my kids have been old enough to really be concerned about school shootings.
Oh
And
yeah,
and so that was they came home from school like the second day, because this is a big walking community. Like there's no school buses here. Kids walk to school or their parents take them. That's the only way they get to school,
yeah,
unless they're on the opposite end of the tax bracket than I am, and they can afford to pay for the little private van line that runs through here.
yeah.
But both of them were really concerned about, hey, what if something happens at school and they just tell us to run home? I was like, oh, well, first of all, you're not going to run home. I was like, that's the first thing you're not going to do. So we came up with a game plan for that. I'm like, look, y'all are going to go to this location. Why? Because it's probably outside of any perimeter that law enforcement is going to set up, and I can get to you easily.
Mhm.
It's a place that I know for a fact is going to be open during the school day. And we've met the people that work there, and they're good, trustworthy people. So I know if my kids show up and they're like, "Oh my God, something happened at school. Can I wait here for my dad to come?" They're not going to be like, "Get out of my store." They're going to be like, "Oh yeah, here, hang out right here."
Yeah,
So it's even things like that, things that you pray never happen, but if something does happen, you have to plan for it.
yeah. I avoided talking about that because I hate talking about it because you never want to think that,
Yeah.
but those things do happen. And working at the University of Washington, working at a college,
Hmm.
we have 4 daycares, we have a hospital, we have, colleges have it happen. It
Yeah.
just happened at University of North Carolina. Virginia Tech is very popular. I mean, people know about these big incidents. So
Yeah.
it's very much on the mind of students and parents and stuff like that. Even your kids are in college, parents are still concerned. And I would say, like, I would venture to say the majority of our alert sign up or parents and not necessarily the students that are signing up
Right.
for alerts because they still care about, like, they want to know about their kids' safety. But yeah, you mentioned, the active threat, the active shooter thing. That's another thing. Your school can also, they talk about emergency planning.
Yeah.
If you ever have a PTA event where you see the district security guy come, that's a
Hmm.
great forum to say, look, what would happen here
Right.
theoretically. When's the last time we ran a drill that involved local law enforcement? Those are
Hmm.
good conversations. Most law enforcement agencies do walkthroughs of schools,
Hmm.
and they're pretty familiar with it. Uh, but like, yeah, my son has done, my oldest has done drills twice a year, everywhere he's been. My second grader just did one where they did active shooter drill, and they made it simulate, like, oh, there's a big swarm of bees, we gotta be quiet so the bees
Right.
don't come and sting us. So, and he's like, blah blah blah, it's bees. I'm like, bad choice for my kid because he's gonna talk the entire time about bees, um, but yeah, it's not one of those things, and like, you understand the physical security of it, and the things that could be done are just like, it's a big rabbit hole. But what's going to happen to my child?
Yep.
Where are they going to go to? Where can I pick them up at? How do I get in contact with them? And then that's a big piece. So if you understand that they've already got a rally point established, or they know where we're going to be, or the emergency pickup policy for that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
some of them will talk to you about that. Some may not, but it's always good to ask those questions,
Yeah.
and you can kind of see, like, look, here's how I'm going to pick up my child, or my child is going to go here.
Yeah.
Like you said, you're going to go to that store.
Right.
Who cares? Go to that store and go
Mhm.
there. Um, and that kind of event kind of brings out those things where the community kind of bonds, right?
Yeah.
When it affects children directly. Large disasters, it's kind of free
Mhm.
for all for your own. But yeah, it's great that you have a close knit community like that. We live in a very urban environment, being
Mhm.
LA, but our kids go to school off the beaten path in a neighborhood that doesn't have any stores or anything like that, and all the
Mhm.
houses look the same.
Oh wow.
Like, just where are you going to go to? Like, go out to the middle of the field.
Yeah.
I'll figure out a way to get you there.
It's about why? Because that's the only place that looks different. So I'm going to be able to wave
Yeah,
your lacrosse stick around or something.
yeah. Like, nothing's gonna fall. Nothing. Just
Right.
go out to the middle of the field. Yeah, we'll get you there. So, but yeah, yeah. Always good questions. Even if your community has a open forum for your emergency management director, or if emergency management's putting on an event in your community, go and ask these questions. Uh, you know, if they have trouble answering them, there may be an issue, but
Right.
you may need to raise a flag. But a lot of them have the answers to this question and a lot more community specific for you. So that goes into knowing your hazards and knowing your school, where my kids go to school at, or even the base. Like, what's going to happen on the base? Like, I'm not sure if you remember like shelter in place kits, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they get this big plastic thing, and you
Yep.
go into the bathroom, tape up,
Yep.
and then you have Bill come and open up the bathroom, and the shelter in place kit opens up. Like, all the plastic falls off.
Yeah.
And the reason I bring up plastic is during that wildfire, you don't really think about that I was talking about we evacuated for. We have to have plastic because when wildfires spread, it's the embers that are in
Yep.
the air that get sucked in through your air conditioning.
Yep.
So when I say know your hazards, your local community can talk to you about the little key tricks to, hey, you're in a wildfire, so shut off your HVAC system,
Yep.
put plastic all around this. I live right underneath Mount Rainier in Washington. I'm not in the Lahar area. That's where all the
Right.
cheap property is. Like, yeah, this is cheap housing. Well, there's a big giant volcano that's going to flow through here. But the smoke, the ash, like being able to tape it up. So talk to your emergency managers in your community, look on their websites, and they all have little tips and tricks that are very, very hazard specific to the hazards in your area. I have a whole toolbox of them in my head just because I moved so many times,
Right.
but yeah, you have a lot of good things out there. There's a lot of good resources. Just like you said earlier, put forth that initial effort and make an opportunity to reach out to them and just Google. I've Googled worse. I mean,
I mean, Google helped me get my master's. So I mean,
yeah, like
and
while you're sitting there Googling like who won like the, how many hits of Milli Vanilli had, like, like what's my hazards? Like I Google a lot more goofy stuff on Google than what my hazards in my neighborhood are.
and there was a couple other things that we were going to talk about. Oh, the Great Shakeout.
Oh yeah. So if you don't know, the Great Shakeout is it's a national kind of drill. You can do a bunch of different things for it, but it's about earthquakes. And I'm not sure if you remember the whole get on your desk and hide and
Oh
hold,
yeah.
stop and hold, and you kind of do that underneath the desk, and you did that drill, so you know what to do in an earthquake area. But it's also testing your plans. Maybe that's an opportunity for you to review, like, hey, if you live in an earthquake area, what would I do here? When we were kids, an earthquake in Mississippi, you're like, no, that'll never happen. Then all of a sudden, evidence came out about the New Madrid fault.
I was about to say the new
And all of a sudden,
Madrid
like
fault.
we're worried about hurricanes and earthquakes here. Like and then we start doing drills as kids. I remember when that kind of spun up. But there's been earthquakes in DC. There's been earthquakes in central U.S. There's obviously along the fault lines on the Pacific coast, Alaska, all the way up there, Hawaii. So being able to do that and review your plans. Hopefully you're subscribed to your alerts in your community, not just the base alerts, but sign up to your alerting tool that your local emergency management has, because oftentimes they will test that alert system during the Great Shakeout. But it's a great tool to be a part of. Almost every single K through 12 entity in the U.S. does it. If they are in a hazard where earthquakes do exist, then they'll take time out. It's done on the third Thursday of whatever time that is. So if it's when I look at my calendar, my cheat, it is going to be let's like 10/26. So October 26th, and it's always held at the same time. So if it's 10/26, it'll be held at 10:26 a.m.
Gotcha.
of your time. So that's when it's held out. But the other thing that you're probably going to see is October 4th. That's when the presidential alert comes out, and that's where us that used to be at FEMA test IPAWS, integrated public alert and warning system, where everyone's going to get that push notification. Right. It's a presidential declaration emergency. So being able to test that. So again, going back to preparedness, subscribe to your alerts. I can't even believe I didn't say that earlier, because I talk about it all the time. Subscribe to your local emergency alerts, not just the base, your county and your city, because they will give you the most accurate stuff. Don't go on Pulse Point or Twitter or anything like that. They will send you out timely alert and warnings about what to do and where to go, and kind of circumvent that rumor mill that exists through social media. So please subscribe for the alerts. And if you're in the Great Shakeout, you can go to their website. It's broken up by states. There's an org for Great Shakeout, and it's broken up by states. The states that have done it the most, California, obviously. If you want a lot of really in-depth resources, go to California state and look at what they have compared to like Mississippi or Louisiana, right? Because it's not a big hazard there. But yeah, New Madrid. Who would have thought that, when we were in 6 years old or whatever we were, that all of a sudden we start doing drills for earthquakes.
And that's one of those that never made sense to me as a kid. And then whenever I got to college, or whenever I got to Georgetown, we did like a whole 2-week study and wrote papers on that fault line. I was like, holy crap! I was like, that's like one of the most potentially dangerous fault lines in the country, and it was right down the road.
Yeah, and then I'm sure most of us in the emergency management community have seen the meme where you just have like a wooden desk, school desk, and it's like, this was a nuclear bomb shelter, this was a hurricane shelter, this is an earthquake shelter, and it's always those things to do. Central, U.S., you look at traditional tornado alley. I keep talking about how old we are, but we're in our 40s. It used to be a lot right there in Oklahoma and Kansas and stuff like that, but as the world shifts, it has now moved a little bit more southeast. And the reason they're causing more damage is a lot of these homes weren't built to the same standard as the building codes that have happened in Kansas and Oklahoma. And we don't have the bomb shelters, the tornado shelters like they did there,
shelter.
or the outdoor warning systems for tornadoes like they do in Oklahoma. So as that tornado alley kind of shifts, we're seeing that new hazard start hitting like Tennessee, and the outbreak Alabama had years ago where all the tornadoes hit, and Mississippi's been hit recently, Louisiana, and you start seeing like, wow, that's kind of a new hazard. Sometimes as weather patterns shift, we start seeing new hazards that, well, my house is that first little piggy. It is made of straw. It is going to, I got to figure out something else here. And just you have to adapt to your climate around you and the new hazards that you may face. That's just one of the things.
That's probably the only bad thing about having, Bill down the street is I've been here for 50 years and there's never been a tornado. As things have shifted and changed over time, especially as the weather patterns in the country change, depending on how you want to word that, as the climate has changed, the weather patterns and your dangers shift.
Yep.
I mean, we used to get tornadoes whenever I was a kid, but they'd come around every once in a while. Nowadays, there's almost like a tornado season.
Yeah.
So, and that was unheard of.
Yeah. It's the springtime. It's the evening. That's when they're going to hit. But also on the flip side, in Mississippi growing up, every year there would be some type of ice sleet event. Year. And now it's not anymore. And it's kind of gone. So as the climate shifts, you're going to get new hazards, and some are going to go away. And it's just an ever-evolving thing. And that's why your local emergency management, they review these plans every 3 years, like to kind of keep up with this on the new data. And, most of them out there are very data-driven. They're going off the facts. They're going off this. You are going to have that black swan event. Like, oh my gosh, like I said, I was going to the Saints game when that earthquake occurs.
Yep.
I also don't really say, since I'm an emergency manager, that it was during when the strongest part of that dissipating hurricane was hitting as well. So I was getting the first bands as the earthquake was hitting, taking my boys to go see the Chargers and the Saints. I measured my level of risk.
Right.
It
was worth it.
Yeah, it was just wind. It was the Saints, but yeah, like, who would have thought, in 60 years, this is we were getting bands of a hurricane hitting Los Angeles. Like that's not a thing. Or the heat dome events in Seattle. Seattle is the highest concentrated population without air conditioning. And 3 years ago, they were getting temperatures of 116 degrees. And the thing about heat is when it comes, you can't tell how many people have died from that. It takes a long time to calculate that. It's not like a hurricane or something like that. And you can't, elderly populations can't leave it. It's what can you do to get by? We have people that can't get out in the heat to go get their dialysis, or it's so checking your neighbor. That's key. Go always know your neighbor, check on your neighbor, make sure they're right, bring them water when they need to. But there's a lot of people that died, and that's a hazard that we were like, doesn't affect us. But as we've seen over the years, our heat keeps increasing in Seattle, and we have these heat domes that come and they settle over for 3 to 6 days. You get little to no overnight cooling. Now we have to prepare for that. what is that? Well, a whole bunch of HVAC technicians in Seattle are making a lot of money
I'm sure
because
they are.
like, and just the buildings, the way they're designed. But yeah, different threats and hazards. And again, that's why your emergency managers look at that.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not doing it, they're paying a consultant to do it for them. So
Right.
they always have good info out there. But as your base goes, emergency managers there flip over as well, unless
Yeah.
you have a civilian that's in charge. Well, so it takes them a little bit to get up to speed about what they have out there as well. Take a look at all the stuff, and so just go to your local community. That's where the legacy knowledge is at. So
Yeah, I think the only time I've seen there be like legacy knowledge on base was there was a guy at Little Rock that was he was guard, but he was a civil. Whenever it wasn't guard weekend, he was the civilian in charge of the EM program there. So he kind of was played both roles, and he was able to have like the Air Force side knowledge, but also did a lot of work with the community as well. So he was a good source of knowledge to have.
yeah, and I will say that for the most part, your local emergency managers are much more holistic.
Yeah.
Uh, they take in a much bigger picture than the base footprint.
Right.
So you're looking at roads being traveled out of the city,
Mm-hmm.
the impact to local critical infrastructure, public transportation entities. Some of us be like, well, it's public transportation. I don't take public transportation. A lot of people do.
Yeah.
DC military folks take public transportation all the time, and that's kind of a critical area. And a lot of times we look at saying, well, if K through 12 is going to be suspend school or because of winter or something like that, I get the day off as well. That's not necessarily true because
Right.
as K through 12 prepares, you look at your daughters and say, go out to the bus stop. If
Mm-hmm.
it's a certain degree temperature, they're not going to subject kids to that.
Right.
But your job maybe say, no, you're coming to work.
You're coming to work,
So,
dude.
so what does that look like? How does
Mm-hmm.
how does working and supporting your family, and do you carry enough leave time constantly, or are you always at zero balance? To be able to take care of your kids in the event something like that happens, or to take an extended period of leave, like you get a storm coming through. It's a winter storm. It's going to be bad. Yeah, let's take a vacation to Florida or Hawaii or something.
Right.
Good time for a vacation, kids.
Oh man.
And then on the flip side too, at UW, we have a big Office of Global Affairs.
Mm-hmm.
Our UW students, University of Washington students, go all over the world. We don't send people during peak hurricane season or typhoon season or anything like that. So if you are traveling, don't go into the mouth of the beast. If it's typhoon season in the Philippines, don't go visit the Philippines. Don't put yourself in the way of that hazard.
So
Right.
you're not sending people to Indonesia as they're getting like a typhoon coming straight at them?
No, or don't go to Mexico in the wintertime. For us, that's when you start
Mm-hmm.
seeing the flooding and the stuff like that down there. And so just if you're gonna take a trip, just watch where you're going, at what time of year you're going.
Yeah. Again, you take this much time to sit there and look at it and be like, get on Google, type in 6 words about what you're doing, and a little bit of onus goes a long way.
Yeah, it does. Yep, certainly does.
What is that? What's that old expression? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's just incumbent. And I think you're when you're by yourself, when you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever, if you're just by yourself, you can probably figure it out. But
Yeah.
When you start having troops in the military, you're a supervisor, young families that you're looking, of troops, and you have a family of your own, and you start I guess incurring more personal responsibility and professional responsibility.
Right.
And then your levels of risk change. You can't carry the same level of risk that you did in your 20s. Me, yeah, my 20s, I was jumping out of the top of the hay barn. Right now, I'm scared to death to fall down because I think I'm going to break a leg in my 40s. So,
because falling hurts a lot more now, Barry.
like, it's going to hurt really, really bad. Your risk changes, and you just got to really understand and be honest with you about what you're willing to do. And if you need to stay behind because of military commitment, look at getting your family out on the road a lot sooner and have that plan for them. Are they going to go back home to a family and visit? Or are they going to just go on a vacation without you? Don't wait till the last second, because that's how you get into the thing where they couldn't get to me, or I was out, you're that person on the news channel saying, well, they never brought me food, or, they're having to airdrop you MREs or something like that. And it's terrible having to go like that won't happen. It
Right.
will. It
Yeah.
has. It happens every year, whether you hear about it or not. There are floods, there are hurricanes, there are earthquakes that like, oh well, California had an earthquake. Yeah, great. Well, the community is like reeling. Like there's no public utilities here, or Jackson, Mississippi, with no water because of
Right.
failing infrastructure. Washington and their heat dome events. Washington and their wildfires. That's a scary thing. If you've ever seen a wildfire, people have been at Beale before around that, seen that hazard. It's a scary, scary thing because you're like, where do I go? And it goes quick.
Well,
And
I
you
tell you
start,
the thing that's crazy about wildfires is, so my hometown is a really big logging community. There was a paper mill was in that town for decades. It was one of the prime employers for that area. They just had a giant wildfire.
yeah,
And growing up, that never would have been, like, we never considered wildfires to be a danger. It was never even considered.
no,
But they had record droughts, a high heat, a high pressure system that just sat there and cooked that whole area.
yeah, the heat
And then
dome.
all it took was one spark, and they burned thousands of acres. The Beauregard Parish, they're calling it the Tiger Island fire. It
Yep.
Thousands and thousands of acres burned. And I mean, people that I know that I went to school with, I mean, families, friends lost homes. I don't know if there was a death toll. I don't remember seeing any numbers about that, but I mean, it was ridiculous. And what people didn't understand is how fast wildfires move.
Yeah,
It's not
it's
one of those things you can
extremely
sit there
fast.
and be like, oh, well, here it comes. We got plenty of time to load up and get out. By the time you're like, oh, there it is, it's on top of you.
Yeah, my mother called me when that happened, and she's just right across the river in Mississippi, and she's like, "We're under a heat like thing and a burn ban and stuff." That never happens. Like, there's very few in some of the dense forest areas in Mississippi that have the lookout towers.
Right.
And my uncle, when he was younger, he was a pilot doing fire spotting, but that's
Mhm.
all gone away because it hazard just never happened again.
Right.
It's a risk; it's always there, but the hazard's not a reoccurring thing.
Mhm.
And then when it happens, you're like, it's a wildfire, but like you said, that thing goes quick, and you
Yeah.
have very limited time to make a decision. Uh, I talked about my dogs, when I was evacuating. You got pets; they require different things for preparedness.
Yeah.
They need food, they need things, they need leashes. You can't just let them go. They need all that kind of stuff. And if you're in a hot area, they need something for their feet. Like if you're going to concrete, you can't just leave them there. Um, then if you have agriculture as well, like cows and stuff like that, what are you
Yep.
doing with them? A lot of times there's networks out there that people can kind of assist with, but yeah, no one would ever thought, you know, my mom's one of the, she's always the prime example I go to. Can't be worse than Camille. I can't believe we had this. I'm
Right.
like, mother, like things are changing and
Yeah.
evolving. You keep addressing it. Well, and that goes into it too. I said NFIP, National Flood Insurance Plan. Make sure you're financially ready. Make sure you're carrying enough insurance for your house. Uh, for your home, like whatever it is that's out there. Like, I mean, you may be in a wildfire area, uh, non-flood area, but like the people like Harvey,
Hmm.
where it comes, it dumps a whole lot of rain, you get urban flooding, and you weren't in a flood zone, and now all of a sudden it's flooding.
Yeah.
How much is me subscribing to NFIP if I'm at a low area? Is that a financial cost I'm willing to occur if I live in a hurricane area?
Mhm.
So I think that that's probably one of the things you should look at as well. I know car insurance, apparently that went up all across the nation. Just bit that bill. But insurance, like with flood insurance as well, it's going to carry not just because you live next to a river.
Mhm.
It's going to be that Harvey event that comes and dumps an enormous amount of rain in a short period of time. And if you live in an urban environment, that's going to increase. If your storm drain out front is blocked,
Yep.
you know, you may be receiving, a ton of rain, and that city's infrastructure only had like a inch and a half diameter pipe underneath there,
Right.
and it backed it all the way up. And all of a sudden, that water comes and gets to your basement or your first floor of your house. You know, make sure your insurance can cover that. It's always good to check in your policies and keep those updated.
Water always wins.
Yeah, that's
Water always wins.
Yeah, it does. And you're never going to recover from it. Every time I see something with water, I'm like, ugh, just the mold and everything. Like,
Uh-huh.
you know where it comes from when the hurricanes hit. And we've had things flooded before, but that's another. A lot of people think that FEMA is going to swoop in and give them money and everything's going to be okay. And that's not really the way it is
Mhm.
on the local level. They're the ones that are executing this response and recovery.
Yeah.
FEMA is just there to support your state.
Yep.
They're not there. They don't manage every disaster.
Mhm.
They are a last line of defense. And if communities are resilient from the people up to the town, the community, the county, the state, then you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
If they have the resources and they prepare for it, they know their hazards and they make you resilient about personal preparedness. FEMA, it's always got a bad name since Katrina. It's always gotten this, but that's not what they're there for. They are not there to be the first responders to every community in the nation. They are only there to help your state and supplement your state's efforts. So don't rely on them to come down writing checks. But on the FEMA part, I will say the old digital cameras with
Mhm.
memory cards, those are a great thing to have on you because if you are impacted severely by a storm, taking pictures of that
Oh yeah.
will go a great way towards filling out your damage assessment to
Mhm.
receive assistance from FEMA. That's a great way to have physical evidence of what property you had, what property was
Mhm.
lost, and the extent of the damage. Because when your accounting person comes by with FEMA and they
Yeah.
rate your property, you can show them the status of your property and show how it changes. So
Right.
if you get if you have a camera with a digital memory card, just go take pictures of what your house looks like
Mhm.
now, all your important stuff, and then as soon as the disaster hits, take more pictures. You know, uh,
That's even something they recommend just for your regular house insurance. Like if you rent for renters insurance or if you own your home for homeowners, because if something happens, you can't just say, "Oh yeah, I had an Italian leather couch with all these super expensive rugs." Are going to prove it. Like where's
yeah,
your
my
photos?
my three Banksy originals got destroyed.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. But when you have your fancy emergency kit
Hmm.
in your little backpack, just understand that water is going to get in that.
Yeah.
So it's always good to put your backpack, if you're going to have one, into a waterproof kind of foot locker or something like that to kind of help it out so you can access your supplies and not damaged by water if it is flooded. But yeah, the camera idea, insurance, same way. Flood insurance, your damage assessment, whether it's via earthquake or not. Like if you go out and take damages or cracks in your foundation or your any type of your structure, then it's a lot easier to get that money and get it flowing a lot more quickly. So they always say take your personal docs with you. Obviously, put them in plastic bags, put them in a safe. Have copies of your debit card with the debit card number on the front and the back. That way you can provide your checks, know
Hmm.
the routing numbers, everything. That way you can hurry up, you're ready, and you can get your money in the event of a large disaster.
Right.
Get it quickly and start recovering.
Mhm.
You may not have power to access the ATM, but they'll deposit it.
But the potential, at least you'll have the potential to be able to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So
All right. Well, that's a bunch of emergency preparedness stuff that we had talked about. So let's talk. Let's switch gears a little bit. You got out whenever you got out of the Air Force. Were you a tech or were you getting ready to be a tech sergeant? I don't
I
remember
was
that.
getting ready. So I just tested and I was like, you know what? I don't want this anymore.
Right.
I thought I did. I thought I wanted to go and make it and I just denied everything and said, no, I'm done. And it was really a kind of short notice thing with
Because your
me
wife was
being,
what? She a tech or was she a master at that point?
she was staff.
Oh, she was staff. Oh, so you are both staff
Yeah.
sergeants.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So, um, we were just kind of like PCSing off cycle. We were had dated for like 6 years and, we kept moving and deploying and moving and deploying.
Yeah.
And it was like, if we want to have a family,
Hmm.
one of us has to get out.
Yeah.
Uh, and at that time, with deployment rates, security forces, which
Hmm.
I was deployed in a much higher tempo than her job. So
Right.
I was like, all right, well, it's going to be me. It just makes the most sense. So
Mhm.
she had just PCS from Colorado Springs. We were both there. She went down to Barksdale, and I separated out of the Springs and went and joined her at Barksdale. And yeah, got married not too long after that.
So how was that transition from you initially? Like, were you just like,
Oh,
no, this is great? Or were you like, I was a hard nosed NCO, and now I'm a house husband.
No, I think I think the military gives you good memories of different things and gives you horrible memories of a lot of things too.
Yeah.
Uh, I think it was equal. I was like, man, you're gonna miss some things, but also you're like, Big Blue is gonna do.
Right.
Big Blue is gonna be okay without me.
Right.
It's gonna be okay. I'm not the glue holding everyone together.
Yeah.
You're gonna miss
Cadam
some
didn't
memories.
fall apart because Barry wasn't there anymore.
Yeah, I think the thing was the worst part about it is, am I ready? Is it? Do I have my? What am I gonna do? What job am I gonna do? How am I gonna provide? We want to have a kid. Like I gotta start back over again. Like I was climbing a ladder,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're like, hey, now go back. Now it's going back to the unknown, and now
Right.
you're a military spouse. Now it's not your career. You're
Mm-hmm.
following, and you're gonna have to do whatever she does and adapt to that. So it's not like I'm gonna go and do whatever I want to go do. So that was probably the scariest part of it. It wasn't, oh, I don't want to leave the Air Force or
Mm-hmm.
I love the Air Force. It's like, no, what's next? Like that is it's like leaving for basic training.
Right.
Like, all right, what's this going to be like? And it was like a shock. So I think when you join the military, a lot of people go like, yeah, I'm going to retire. I'm going to do 30 years. But when you make that quick mindset change, you're like, no, not for me anymore. We
Right.
want to do this. We're going to do X, Y, and Z, and it's time. Because I was on the next bucket to go out.
Right.
I just got back from a 15-month deployment, and I was back for like 8 months. And they're like, "Hey, you're up again in a couple more months." I was like, "No,
It's
this
crazy.
is for the birds. Like, what are you
Right.
doing here?" And it turned out to be this insane thing of like, I just got back from basically 2 years of being
Mm-hmm.
overseas, and then I'm going to go again. And essentially, I would be taking like a test for tech for 3 years,
Right.
one test for 3 years. I was like, "What is this? Like, this is nuts." And a lot of things about the military, like when I was in, I was like, yeah, I can't wait. But yeah, it's the unknown. It was like, all right, so now I got to flip the script, and it's not about me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And what am I gonna do with my life? Our
Do you
life.
think that's what drew you to come back to work with the DAF police? Was felt a little bit
Uh,
familiar, or was that just like a, oh, what the hell, let's try this?
that was an opportunity that presented itself at the time. So before, um, I was like, I don't want to do this again, and it just so happened that opportunity popped up. Uh, I had other pending applications that are out there, and it just so happened that moved through, and that was just going to be a stopgap
Right.
because my wife and her job moved like every 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that was just going to be a bridge. Like, give me a paycheck, let me do something,
Mm-hmm.
give me more insurance for my child. We had our oldest there. He had a lot of medical problems. I'm not sure if you remember that.
Oh yeah.
And it was one of those things where like, yeah, it was something that was very much needed at the time. It wasn't something that I was like, I'm going to pursue this GS career or anything like that. Because like, there's things about the military I love, but yeah, I didn't like I have a whole lot of work to do, but now I got to give up my day to go watch some commander's call or watch this.
Right.
I didn't want that anymore, and I didn't like that anymore. And I thought that was kind of frivolous, but yeah, the DAF police thing, like, I always wanted to be a cop when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
Weigh my risk assessment. I'm like, no, no, now I got a kid. I do not want to be a law enforcement officer anymore. It was fun. I was like, yeah, I would watch cops and like, I want to be that guy pulling
Uh-huh.
alligators out of people's front yard and stuff like that. And had a kid and went over to a friend's house and they had alligator there. I'm like, no, there's no way I'm going to get into this thing.
I'm
I got
going
too much to
going home.
lose. So I think, yeah, it bridged the gap where I
Right.
needed to go. And, as you know, like right when that was done, we got orders to off it Air
Mm-hmm.
Force Base. And I think with the GS system, I didn't really pay attention to it at first, but once you're in it, it became a little bit easier to transfer around.
Right.
So I looked at that as an opportunity later as we're getting ready to move. I was like, oh, maybe at Offutt, I can move into a different job. And having that SF-50 from me leaving
Mm-hmm.
Barksdale to go get a job over it, I was immediately picked up for a position up at Offutt when I get there. So
Mm-hmm.
that was a good thing. However, that did not work out when I went to DC because DC
Mm-hmm.
has so many GS positions. They're like, I got a call 2 years after I was there, like, you applied for this position. I'm like, I don't even remember what this is. Like, what are you talking about?
I don't even live there anymore. What are you
Yeah,
talking
like you're
about?
qualified, you're SF50. And but no, the Barksdale thing was to bridge a gap, but it did have some positive things other than working night shift and stuff like that, which was fun. Like, being with all you guys again, it felt like you were kind of still in the military again, where you had that camaraderie. Uh, but family life wise, it still took a toll,
Yeah.
working meds and stuff like that. And yeah, still took a toll. But I will say being in the GS system, it kind of helped out still having the SF50 with you.
So as you've gone on from that, you went on to get your degree. How have you found employment as a military spouse to be? Like, have you really found it to be easy? You found it to be a little bit more difficult, especially with you being kind of in a specialized field?
It is hard. I don't care what you do.
Mhm.
I think it's hard. I think it's an unfair hill to climb
Mhm.
because you have a lot of military spouses out there that are qualified in a whole bunch of areas.
Mhm.
However, their family situation may not allow them to, or look at law enforcement. You need to get post certified, you need to get X, Y, and Z, and then
Yep.
they spend all this money to get you into the unit, and then you're out 2 years later. Like you're like our wives are saying pretty much on the PCS cycle, like
Yeah.
2 years and you're gone. So who wants to invest that? I
Mhm.
think there's a lot of things to do. Like I went to DC and was going to Georgetown and doing the brick and mortar program there, like work in class. And I was watching my oldest, and then hey, here comes number two. We left off it when my wife was pregnant with our second son, and I was at home doing a graduate degree. Would
Right.
work great because I had the GI Bill,
Mhm.
but DCs are very expensive. So I was like, what can I do to kind of help that out? I took an internship.
Mhm.
Uh, I was in my 30s. I was like, I'll work for this company. I was making you know teens in money just to
Mhm.
bring on something, but it was getting me experience, and I worked remotely. I
Mhm.
was able to do my schoolwork, watch my son during the day, and I would stay up at night and do my deliverables.
Right.
And it was a company that did that leveraged geographic information system
Mhm.
for preliminary damage assessments for states and counties. And I would do training programs for them, or just basic customer service for them, and add people and subtract people, and work on their county lines and buildings and stuff like that remotely at night. And I'd be up to like 2 in the morning every night. So a lot of bad habits there. And then my wife would rush home from work, and she would
Mhm.
would do a quick handoff and get on the subway, go to Georgetown. And then after that, I went and worked for FEMA in the
Mhm.
National Exercise Division. What got me there was my prior military experience,
Mhm.
like not in the emergency management, the school, going through the degree program got me
Right.
that program. But also be on the military spouse. Like
Mhm.
you look on USA Jobs, you had the military spouse button,
Mhm.
so that kind of helped out too. And then after that, I went to work at Booz Allen Hamilton as a consultant
Mhm.
for DHS, which worked great because I was remote working a lot, so allowed me to have a family life.
Mhm.
But um, it was pretty easy to get on there. That didn't have a whole lot of military, like, oh, are you prior military? Like
Right.
they were just hiring people for qualifications on the way out. Um, but I will say that there are a few. I think there's a federal thing that gives companies bonuses and tax breaks for hiring military veterans.
Mhm.
I think one of the big things is like that's got to be done for military spouses as well. Like, there's a big thing to hire. They give tax breaks for hiring those military retirees or veterans.
Mhm.
Hiring a military spouse is kind of key because once you say that you're a military spouse, or it's not hard to see your resume and go, why did you move around from
Right.
Nebraska to Shreveport to DC to like that's a weird pattern. Like, oh
Right.
well, it's really easy to figure out. Like, oh, you went from North Carolina to Pendleton or Korea and stuff
Mhm.
like that. But outside of like, you see a lot of like people wasting their money. I think it is like you do like the Mary Kay or
Mhm.
whatever it is, and they charge you upfront money.
Right.
A lot of spouses and a lot of ease and stuff like that, they're already financially strained. I don't think you should ever be put forth your own money to start your own initiative.
Mhm.
I think when you look for a position, uh, those are open conversations to have with people. A lot of times, employers will talk to you. I think about remote working, teleworking opportunities, and stuff like that. But just general military spouse, it's hard because you look at it now, like your wife's working. Who's in charge of moving? And who's in charge of your kids? Like my wife works, and it's not a slam towards my wife or anything, but she's so busy. Like I know my kids' teachers, I know their grades. I'm on Aries. I know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I got their lacrosse kit. I have a thing. But the military is so busy, like they don't have time to be really ingrained into the moving process, the packing process, and stuff. And that's all on you. So you have a lot of responsibilities as it is with the family, because the active duty spouse has so much on their plate in that position. Regardless of your position, you could be an E1 and you are working a lot. You have a lot of responsibilities. You have upgrade training. You're new to the Air Force. You just moved to a brand new area. You just married someone. Whatever it is, you have a lot on your plate. For a military spouse, they have all that family stuff and to go out and go get a job. And then, you also need to get off working time to go pick up the kids. It's challenging all the way around. It's not like when you've grown up in a community where you have a network of friends, and it's just different. Like I have friends of mine back home, like, oh, I wish I had that in my life, because that's a lot easier. And people that worked at, the paper mill or something like that can get you into a job and is willing to work with you about your schedule. In Los Angeles, man, I go to a business that they've probably never seen a military person before.
Yeah,
the military footprint is very small. When you say you're a military spouse, I'm like, I don't even know what that is.
Right.
But I will say, like, there's opportunities out there. You just got to be, you can't be, I'm holding out for a manager position.
Right.
If you need supplemental income or something like that, chase down the internships. I know people say, like, don't do that, or that's going to reset you on your search, but it gives you experience. Oftentimes they're telework eligible. Just research the company and do what you can there. But finding employment, good employment that offers retirement planning, and insurance and stuff like that. Yeah, I get it. TRICARE, everyone has it, but always carry a second supplemental insurance if you got that chance. Having those companies is very hard to find, like very hard. Like I get working with the CDC is that's a great tool. It gets people gets people, they still have base access, they're working closer to their spouse. There's a lot of benefits that come flexibility that come with working at the CDC, but we have a small CDC out here. A lot of times they don't have that out there.
Yeah, and not everybody wants to work at the CDC.
Yeah, that's another thing too. Is there are some, I think we have, like, childcare is a need out here, but there's not that many slots, because they can't. I look at, like, I think it was Wyoming. They had like 2 daycares. They're huge out there, and that's a big spouse employment opportunity that pays well. And you can go to other towns where it's really, really small, and you're like, there's no employment here whatsoever, or they may not have your job. Like, we're emergency management.
Yeah.
You go to a county, they got one guy for the whole county, and they're not hiring anyone else. You go to DC, you can kick a quarter in any direction, you're going to hit an emergency manager or someone that does that role. So your location matters as well. But I was extremely lucky when my wife got orders to Washington State, that I latched on with the University of Washington, and we just so happened to have all the protocols in place that if we did have to remote work, we could hit that switch. And we tested that plan, and they're like, oh, well, it worked. So what's the problem? And then my boss is my vice president. She's a great person, and she's like, yeah, your wife's in the military. Why wouldn't you remote work? You're doing everything. So I fly back to Seattle when she really needs to talk to me, or when I really need to do something important that's there, and they fly me back.
So even a job like emergency manager, you're saying, can be remote work.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there is not one. In fact, I think I'm more productive remote, because we have 3 campuses in Bothell, Tacoma, and Seattle. We have a research site in Friday Harbor. We have another one in Pack Forest. We have one in Arizona. We have a fishing research vessel that takes out 3 different colleges, and it's the University of Washington's. We have a campus in Rome. So when I do emergency preparedness, it's not very flying to Rome. I wish they would have. I can just hop on Teams and teach everyone, or I can do a video recording on Teams, or if I want to do a tabletop exercise like I do for the football stadium or football team every year, that's a 3.5, 4 hour virtual exercise that everyone loves, because they don't need to come pay for parking, or they don't need to commute through Seattle traffic to get to the stadium where we host the event. But if we have an in-person event, I can plan it remotely and then fly back for day of conduct and fly back that night. I just did it a couple of weeks ago with we had a big one with the FBI exercise. So yeah, you can be effective and you don't need to be there. We have a virtual emergency operations center that manages everything, kind of connects everyone to it. So if you have a plan and it's been tested and you have the redundancies built in, it's a very easy switch to do. But I'll also say consulting was great. Worked for Booz Allen Hamilton because I didn't need to be working 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. I could stay up at night, and as long as I was dedicating my hours to the project I was supporting,
Right.
those hours could have been 9 p.m. to 1 a.m., whatever it is, or I could just do it one entire day and I have the rest of the week off. I had and then when you start working and supporting multiple projects, it's not just going to work every day,
Right.
hitting the button like George Jetson. You're supporting different projects with different
Right.
initiatives, and every day something new about that project. So that was done remotely as well. Granted, it was DHS. They're not going to let you go to Copenhagen and still work for DHS, right? You got to be US, but those opportunities are out there. Don't just look for jobs on USA Jobs or something that just says remote. Go through the hiring process. If they want you, they really want you, they're going to be able to support you remotely and remote work. Like, I mean, you're not going to be a cop and work remotely, right? So,
Yeah. Kind of hard to respond to calls from
a bank manager and work remotely. But as times have changed and as you change, I'm an emergency manager. That's fine. I've done my master's. Great. Keep retooling yourself. What else do you need to put in your toolbox to make you better? Like, I just went and got my certified business continuity professionals certification. That was hosted free. It's a $5,000 certification. It was hosted free on the base. Went through it for a week, passed the test online, got my certification. It's a whole new career field I have that opens up for me that I can leverage emergency management in as well. How do you plan for disruptions and during a disaster or business supply chains and stuff like that? That whole thing, if I go to LinkedIn, remote, it's all remote. So if you look at some careers out there, you may need to look at leveraging some type of professional education to get yourself into that career field and be able to work those remote jobs and support it. Because they're out there. They are. FEMA was doing it before COVID. Booz Allen Hamilton was doing it before COVID. Companies were doing it before COVID. It's not something new. They're out there.
I think that's one of the things that kills me sometimes is people say, oh, well, you can't do this job remote. I'm like, well, what job is it? And it'll be basically some sort of like office data entry thing. I'm like, that job is designed to be remote. Like,
yeah,
if they're going into a database to pull their data anyway, to put it into this other spreadsheet. Why does it matter if that person is at home doing it in their home office or coming into the office to do it? So they're doing the same amount of work.
Yeah.
But there's so many things that could be remote that people they're so caught into the mindset of it has to be done in the office that it's like, no, like with a little bit of effort, so many more things could be remote and be done from a home office.
Yeah. And, a friend of mine, he's a GS-14, I think. He's an IT guy for a Social Security Administration in the state of Kentucky. They were like, you got to be in here every day. COVID hit, go remote, and everything's worked fine. And when you say in the office, we were talking about this earlier, is the main reason they want you to come back to the office in a lot of circumstances is that business owns that building.
Yeah, we were just talking about that earlier.
Do anything with it.
Yep.
Booz Allen Hamilton, leased building. FEMA, leased building. Almost every single one of them are leased spaces that they don't need you back there. A lot of times they need you back there because they're paying for that.
Right.
And they're paying to keep the utilities on, so they want you back in the office to supplement that. But
they've got to justify that cost somehow.
Yeah, but there's other ones like FEMA. We did hoteling, right? We did hot desk because there wasn't enough desks there for people. So we just go, and that was a big aspect of it. But yeah, they want you back in because they own the building. But there's jobs out there. Don't limit yourself. Get your professional education. Change up what you're doing. And there's jobs like not just LinkedIn, but go to the website like Meta or things like that offer very, very, very entry level positions. And if you can latch on with an entry level, that'll give you experience that, yeah, I get it. Like everyone wants to be a manager. Everyone wants to make 100K. Like when I got out of the military, Yeah, I went from making good money and having good benefits to my first job. Uh, I didn't. You probably don't know this. It was hauling around Lidl units in travel trailers in the oil fields in Louisiana for the oil field sites for the the foreman to stay
Mm-hmm.
in while the oil field that site's hot in Lidl units for when they do night work. And I was bringing home a whopping like 25,000 a year, and
Mm-hmm.
I was driving an hour and a half to get to work using gas in my Dodge Ram and stuff like that. I needed something
Yeah.
to get in, and yeah, that didn't really help me in my career, but it put food on the table. Like
Mm-hmm.
it brought home something. But these internships will afford you opportunities to not only experience the work but network.
Right.
And when you go in there and you do it good, like I went into FEMA, and I was talking about an internship. I was like, I'm the old guy, like the De
Right.
Niro movie. Like I'm mid-30s asking for an internship.
Uh-huh.
Um, or working for the GIS company. You don't expect to see that, but there's a little humility there where
Mm-hmm.
you got to be like, I got to start from the bottom in order to get somewhere. And if you latch on, you get that remote opportunity, then you can do it all throughout your spouse's career, and
Mm-hmm.
you can stay on, you can get good benefits. And, when you're done, it's all about your career, maybe, maybe they follow you around, but, you know, a lot of times I see families suffer when I think there's like, oh, we can't do this or we don't have to pay or anything like that. And I think it's a mental cycle, and you
Mm-hmm.
just get trapped in a cycle like, I have kids, I have responsibilities, I don't have time for a job,
Mm-hmm.
or no one would hire me. But there are things out there. There are opportunities out there like consulting that you can get in on that's very, very entry level. Maybe it's just, typing some stuff up, very low level stuff, but you can do it on your own time that affords you a little extra income. And then just grow throughout that. Keep trading it in and doing different jobs and stay remote. But that's it's a big asset. And we were talking earlier, like I could absolutely go somewhere else in LA right now and make
Right.
so much more money than I'm making right now. So
Mm-hmm.
much more. Um, but I'm able to pick up my kids every day from school, take them to
Mm-hmm.
school, get them to lacrosse practice, get them to whatever, and still do it. And I
Mm-hmm.
work my own schedule. And I listen to other people say this to me when I was, different things. I'm like, man, whatever. I got to have X number of degree and stuff like
Right.
that. You really don't. Just retrain yourself and keep a lookout for things that interest you that are free on base, that are professional education. There's tons of resources out there. If you're, I think they have it for spouses now. You may not even know this. Syracuse gives a free project manager certificate
Hmm.
for military and spouses, I believe. You just go through, they have a whole section. You can get your
Mm-hmm.
PMP. If you don't know what a PMP is, it's a great tool to guide projects throughout its lifespan.
Yeah.
It's a big asset.
That,
You can
that's
use
and
that.
that's the new hot thing right now too. Is everybody's pushing that PMP the PMP jobs.
Yeah, you can do PMP, you can project manage it. I'm a big fan of the program management certificate
Mm-hmm.
because that's a little bit higher. So you're managing the program
Right.
strategically and doing strategic plans rather than the project where you're just kind of managing the lifespan of it. But you can go work in a facility style like a University of Washington that does capital projects.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping track of that and managing those style projects and reporting out on due outs there. But those are free certifications that you can get as a military spouse. And I'm pretty sure if you go to, I think it's Syracuse's IVEMP or something weird like that,
Mm-hmm.
just Google it and it'll come up. And or hey spouse, let me borrow your GI Bill for a little bit.
Right.
Like
That's how I got my second master's degree. hey,
yeah.
hey, babe, what you doing with this GI Bill over here?
And you got two of them too. Like
Mm-hmm.
don't stop evolving. The world is evolving. You got to
Oh
reinvent
yeah.
yourself too. You can't just be like, I have a history degree and you
Mm-hmm.
never built up on it. You got to every 2 to 3 years, you got to keep looking at reinventing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If there's something you really love, like here in Los Angeles, there's going to have the International Association of Emergency Managers
Right.
meeting in November. Yeah, I'm going to go to it, but if you've never been anywhere about it or don't know about it or
Mm-hmm.
something like that, and you really want to get into it, it's a great opportunity to network. Like go over there, meet people,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll tell you, networking goes a long way.
Oh yeah.
I didn't believe it. I was like, whatever. And yeah, you know someone that knows someone. That's how I
Mm-hmm.
got into Booz Allen Hamilton. A friend of mine was my instructor at Georgetown.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, hey, would you mind do the whole like, do you know someone that works at
Right.
Booz Allen Hamilton? I'm like, I do.
As a matter of fact, I do.
And boom. I mean, I had to go through a 4-hour-long interview process,
Right.
and that's a whole nother skill too. Like, you may want these jobs too, but you got to practice your interviews,
Yeah.
because you can go in there and, they're not going to ask you crazy questions. A lot of them won't be like, hey, so if you're a cat, what's your favorite lamp? Like, they're not
Right.
going to ask you something like that, but they're going to ask you questions that require a good response, and you just got to be comfortable responding to those. So it's all that, take those free opportunities that the bases have towards interview,
Mhm.
right? But I think on the military side, separating, uh, I think they can go a little bit longer with the transition, the TAPS
Right.
options. I think there's a lot of way, because even after going through TAPS, it felt like I was drinking water through a fire hose.
Mhm.
It's like, here you go, get out. I was like, all
Yeah,
right.
and you're out.
I didn't feel prepared to get out, and nor should, like, what businesses and go, let me give you all this training since
Right.
you're leaving our company. That's a very difficult thing. Um, but yeah, I think, there's a lot of opportunities there. But spouses, don't go to your spouse's club. You don't have to do that. Look at your education opportunities that the base affords, and look at the classes they afford. Go take, typing if you need that, and just reinvent yourself. And then, I'll always say any spouse can reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to review your resume. I have 15 different types of resumes. As you know, a GS resume
Right.
looks a lot different than the one sheeter that the University of Washington wants to see.
Right.
They want to see one page, put some color on it, make some flair, give me some bullet points, and we got you. And, GS system has robots screening it.
Yep.
UW's got people looking at it. So you got to carry those resumes around, and there's different tips and tricks. QR coding a business card, just have people scanning that at businesses, or at conferences. So reinvent yourself, remarket yourself, retrain yourself, figure out what you want to do. Don't just take a job because, like, oh, I need money, so I'm gonna go work at the child care center. Do something that's gonna take an internship with a company that you want to work for. It may only be 3 hours a week, but
It's better, but it's something.
you're meeting people and you're gaining experience.
Mhm.
But as you know, yeah, getting hired in the military, like, we both want to do law enforcement.
Mhm.
No department in the agency is going to say, and the world's going to go,
Mhm.
I'll hire you for a year and a half.
Yeah,
Then
not
you
happening.
I'll get you ready for the next department. No worries.
And on top of that, like, even if they're like, yeah, sure, we'll do that, they're going to put you on night shift in the crappiest areas that is possible to be in, because you got to earn your stripes, and it's just
Yeah, I'll
always a
say,
thing.
that's a good thing you bring up too, is the night shift in the bad area. When you get that Leo trainer, and you got that, they're better.
Oh
And
yeah.
they've been in that area. They've seen it. They're jaded. You're going to come into people like that with your new company too. You're going to get hired. You're going to meet Bill at the water fountain. I've been here 20 years. Blah, blah, blah. If you've been somewhere 20 years, move. That guy, if you look around, you're like, that guy's been here for 20 years. That guy's been here for 30 years. You may need to look at leaving that company, because nothing's going to get new there. Everyone's going to be jaded and stuff like that. So look at your company, look at the people interviewing you, understand where they came from, and you get a better idea. But I've made that mistake before, and
Yeah,
that can make employment awfully hard.
I just had the same conversation a little while ago, where part of the thing that spouses struggle with, and you kind of mentioned it, is nobody wants to take a chance on you for 2 or 3 years before you go, and they're like, oh, well, your spouse, you're only going to be here for a couple of years and then you're going to leave. But the national average now for people staying at a job is 5 years or less.
Yeah.
It's nobody. It's like, I just again, the conversation just said, nobody's staying at a company long enough to get that gold watch anymore. They're staying until they feel like they've reached their limit and they've progressed as far as they're going to progress, and then they're bouncing.
Yeah.
So
and
you're going to get the same amount of time out of a military spouse as you are for most civilians.
It's not I have my 401k through this company. I got to stay with, Waterworks or whoever it is for this long. You're bouncing around. You're doing more private investments, or, the world has changed since my uncles, right? You used to have to drive to the stockholder, that guy's office and talk.
Right.
Now you can just hop online and be like, there's, day trading and all this other stuff, but you can do your own personal investments and manage your own retirement outside of a company controlling your retirement age for you.
Right.
So there's people that do. Like, I met a guy, I'm not sure how much that he claimed that he made $350,000 a year. 28
Okay.
years old, military veteran, doing business continuity for 2 companies down here at the same time. He's like, all I'm doing is I'm rushing all this through as quick as possible, saving as much money. That way I can retire. So he's overworking himself doing that. But yeah, I mean, change your that retirement's held to you. It's not, I got to stay with the bank for 30 years and they're going to give me that gold watch and it's non-existent anymore. But that's a great point to bring up. I never really thought about that as being somewhere for 5 years and it's time to go. 5 years is about that good enough time to see if a company is continuing to evolve,
Right.
or you're kind of, hey, we're going to just keep steady on. What are you happy with? Like, maybe you maxed out in your position. Now you got to seek out a different path to go where you want to go, but encourage you to jump around as much as possible as well. That's hard though. It's hard to even to get into it, but
yeah. But it is true though, like, because if you get there and everybody's been there for 30 years and there's really no chance for progression. I mean, how many times have you been on base and you're like, let's congratulate Ethel for 40 years of federal service? It's like, come on, man.
yeah, and they just stay there and they're like, oh, we've always done it that way. I hate that answer.
That is
Like
the worst phrase in business.
I'm like, here we go. We've always done it that way. But yeah, I think you said something just a second ago. I can't remember what you said, but it brought up a point to where, yeah, you're not there anymore. It's all doing the same thing. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just one of those unique roles that people need to accept and they need to be okay with. The GS positions now, like, a lot of them can be done remotely, but they want you in the office because that is space that they expect you to be in. So yeah, don't always look GS. Look other places. There's other things out there, but always be prepared for those orders to Germany, and you may not have an opportunity. I know Italy has a lot of spouse employment regulations that are really tight over there about being able to work. So I see a lot of spouses stay behind when their spouses get orders to Italy.
They just had matter of fact, the Italian government just a couple weeks ago put out a big memo about the allowing spouses to work remotely, but if they're working for a city, state, or county government that's remote, then they only have to pay those income taxes. If they are working for anybody else, like let's just say they got a job with Booz Allen working remote, they also have to pay Italian taxes.
See, but that's another thing. Like, I don't pay Los Angeles or LA or California tax or anything like that. Not only because I work for UW remotely, it's a military spouse. Like, I'm a resident of Washington State. I don't pay your tax. Even if I worked here, my taxes would be different as well. So understanding those benefits as well. Like, you can still be a resident of a different state and work somewhere and not have to pay those taxes. So
we're still Alaska residents because there's no state sales tax in Alaska.
Of course you are. Yeah. And same thing like
of course you are.
Yeah, same thing like Washington. Yeah, you want to stay and do that, and then that'll play things as you go through retirement and stuff like that. But there's benefits to take advantage of. I know also there is a way for teaching. I think there's a lot of efforts out there for being able to educate spouses and stuff to become teachers and be certified as teachers and go on and teach in a K through 12 system. And I've known people that have done that as well, that they bounced around, but they were always able to find that substitute style position and get experience. And now the one I know, like, she got to her final duty station with her spouse who's retiring, and she has a great job teaching, like, high school or something like that, making a good amount of money because of her experience and her degree stuff. So always reinvent yourself. There's always a new career field that oh, this is hot, like you said, the PMP.
Right.
And now it's not even the PMP anymore. Now it's a program management thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of great tools. I encourage you to look at the Syracuse thing.
I'm gonna check that out. I was just looking at another one on LinkedIn the other day, so I'll check that one out too and see what it looks like.
Yeah, and you can't beat free. I mean, it is so.
But I mean, if it's as long as it's good, it all depends on what you do with it anyway. I mean, You could be,
Yeah.
it could be a program you pay a lot for. If you don't pay attention to it, you don't put forth any work, it's not going to be worth anything anyway. So
Yeah, there's that fine line of like you can go to a university and get a degree. It doesn't matter the name on the university. A lot of times it does.
yeah, sometimes it
So
does.
yeah, if you have an opportunity to take something that's a free course through Syracuse or whatever it is, take it. But also, you may latch onto a business like Booz Allen Hamilton or a bank or something like that that offers courses through a local community, whether that's in strategic leadership or some other type of free learning tool. Great, do it. Go do it. Go put that in your toolbox. That'll give you opportunities for further down the road. There are um, free courses through, I can't remember the name of it. Just look for free courses through Michigan or Cornell and stuff like that. Basic small ones that you can do for a month at your own pace, and it's like strategic leadership, or it gives you just tools to put in your toolbox, and you add that to your resume, and then you incorporate that to experience, and then yeah, you're well on your way. But yeah, take advantage of those school opportunities as well.
Awesome. Well, I know you it's getting close to time for my kids to start getting out, and we got to start getting stuff ready for them. And I know you are got other stuff you need to do today. But
yeah, it's lunchtime here, so your kids are
right,
getting out of school. It's 11 o'clock here.
right.
So.
Well, man, I appreciate you coming on. It's been fun. It's really, it's hard for me to get guys to come on, and so I was happy when you're like, yeah, sure, what the hell, I'll sit there and talk to you for a little bit.
Yeah, we can. I'm happy to do it on any other different topics you want to talk about as well, because I think, like you and I know, like it's very, when you go to a spouse event, not a whole lot of guys around, and
No.
there's also not a whole lot of guys out there that, if you are a military spouse, that they may not be, they want to go do other things, just like female spouses too. But sometimes I've seen with my guy friends that are military spouses, it's like, well, they feel like they want to go do a career. And it's just a hard adjustment sometimes to say, look, you can't be that cop anymore because
Right.
they offer that remote. Like, here's how you need to reinvent yourself. So I think that's a big opportunity, and I think spouses clubs should embrace education opportunities and advertise internships and stuff like that a little bit more, and support people a little bit more, because that'll help out get positions and get entry level positions.
Absolutely.
But yeah, reach out anytime. More than happy to help. And if you need my info, feel free to advertise it, and people can reach out on LinkedIn. And I'm happy to provide all my failures and successes.
well, failures is how you learn, right? If people just win all the time, they're not learning anything.
I am learning a lot.
All right, so you just said if people want to reach out to you, they can on LinkedIn.
Yeah. So I'll give you that. Just look for Barry Morgan on LinkedIn, and it's University of Washington, so you'll find me on LinkedIn. Or if you were going to reach out to my email, just Barry BARRY.Morgan JR as in junior at yahoo.com, and we can set up something if we want to do a Zoom meeting, or I can share my resumes, or if you got an interest in emergency management, or any other type of help I could provide, I'm certainly here to provide it.
Right on, man. Appreciate all that. Well,
yeah, no worries, man.
You go get your lunch. I'm gonna go get ready for my kids. It's my oldest kid's birthday today, so we got to get ready for.
Oh, happy birthday! Happy birthday! What is it, like 11, 12?
Yep, she just turned 11.
Oh yeah, I figured our kids were right, same age. So cool. All righty, man. We'll have a good one.
All right, man. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah.